Grace.
Grace, thank you for joining us this morning. Great to have you as always. And this story, your 7 a.m. story this morning, this is really, really interesting, right? Because we've kind of talked about it in our CEO, Craig Fuller's state of mind. So let's get your take on it right now. The VC market, which has been hot the last 2 years, what does it look like now?
Well, it's funny you bring up the last 2 years, and there's plenty of people that I've run into at events and just speaking with them in regards to different articles. And they always talk about the valuations, right? And how sky high they are. And the fact that when we talk about unicorns, they're supposed to be becoming a startup unicorn is supposed to be once in a lifetime, 1 in 100 opportunity. And I can think of at least 5 or 6 that we saw in the last year alone. And so I wanted to kind of showcase to people why exactly this all fell into place so perfectly for supply chain. We saw carriers take advantage of the market over the last year or so, and it's flipped drastically. And I wanted people to understand that those valuations we aren't going to see anything like that in the near future until things start to change. And I wanted to give people just an easy way to understand and digest that the economy does correct itself. And all of these things that we're seeing are things that we should have seen when we push the stimulus into the economy, and not that that's good or bad or however politically you want to take it. It's just the way that the economy naturally works. And I'm sure, Anthony, and all the work that you do, it's probably the most fascinating thing about the economy as a whole is how it works so well in the yin and yang of nature, right? It self-corrects itself. And that's what we're falling into now. And we're starting to see signs of it when it comes to layoffs and different moves across freight startups. I think one in particular people should kind of look twice at is something like the recent announcement of Flexport's change in leadership. Now, it's very difficult to push your runway out as much as possible without that experience. So I hope that people look at certain announcements in over the next 6 months to a year, however long it takes to maybe get back to a more favorable market. But we were in a very unique situation, and I wanted to capture that and relay that to people to understand. There's a reason we saw so many unicorns when we did, because it wasn't just like the pandemic, a once in a lifetime situation.
Grace, when I look at how venture capital was kind of spent over late 2020, really all of 2021, one word kind of comes to mind, and it's reckless. There were times where VC spending was just reckless. You're just throwing money at these different startups, and everybody, it seemed like, was announcing Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D, E, F fundings, which seems kind of crazy. Yeah. And you mentioned that, as you said, you saw 6 to 7 to 8 unicorns, that $1 billion valuation in that 1 year span, which was just like mind-blowing. It felt like every week you were writing about this company had another unicorn. And then I think that a lot of these companies almost took this VC money that they were raising and took it as kind of like a safety blanket, right? And now that we're in this kind of downturned market, they're finding out that that's not quite the case. Do you think that with companies now who maybe secured some funding, had a great valuation, and now are facing layoffs and now are facing business trouble, do you think that they're in any type of pressure from those investors or from the funding that they did receive to kind of maybe insulate themselves a little bit more from the market by making those types of layoffs?
Yeah, a couple things to that. One, I almost want to push against you a little bit because it's cheap money. And this is the point of venture capital, is to get those investments out there and to invest in areas that our economy truly needs. I mean, the fun part about this is I don't think we're going to see a tremendous slowdown in investment, because a lot of the problems that our economy is facing right now are still rooted in supply chain. So I think you'll see it less in other places. You're seeing it in cryptocurrencies. Currently, you might see it in some fintech as well. But the root of our problems right now is supply chain. And when interest rates fall that low and the government sets us up for a situation like it did during that time, that is when a VC is supposed to come in and make sure that cheap money per se is going to work. I think that if there are companies out there that didn't have a set plan of what they wanted to do with that, that's the people that we might see a little bit more trouble on. I think Ryan really explained it well in that last paragraph where he touched on the fact that, if you are going to give up a percent of your company, make sure it's worth it and make sure that you know exactly what the plan is. And that's why I kind of bring up Flexport, because I think they are going to need help in expanding their programs and their solutions as a whole, which is nothing wrong with that. There's really incredible entrepreneurs, and it takes time to develop those skills to lead a company of that size. And I think that's what we're seeing now, is what the companies now have in their utility belt might be a little bit more than some of the leadership tenure has the ability to control. I think what's funny is I look back at a lot of the interviews that I did over the last couple of years, and I would bring up, why now? And it was almost an answer of like, we couldn't avoid it. I mean, it was just like Ryan explained. It was kind of name your price and you get what you want. It's the perfect market. It's kind of like, why would we get upset with the carriers or the shippers when the pricing power is forever in their favor in a certain time or a certain market, right? You got to take advantage of what the economy is placed before you, and that is their role in VC, is to make sure that that's being deployed in the most appropriate places at the end of the day. So I don't think that there's anyone out there that maybe there might be some out there that maybe took on more than they should have, but we'll start to see exactly what they do with it. And I think when you see these layoffs, it's less about yes, we hired too many people, but it's more about we need to make sure that our cash can go longer than we expected, because we don't know when this downturn or when this bullwhip effect will come back to normalcy. And that's the question that's up in the air.
And Grace, so it sounds like you anticipate there still being some money flowing into the freight tech space as we continue to move forward. With that, do you anticipate their pressure being on for truly being innovative? I know I've loved so many of these demos that we've gotten to see throughout this last year during virtual conferences and things like that, but it did kind of start to seem like there were just some solutions that no one asked for, no one really needed. Do you see that this might still be a trend, or that there might be a little bit more pressure on, okay, hey, what are you fixing here? Get to the bottom of the issue that you're trying to solve.
There's a number of technologies that I know had very little, if no, revenue behind it the last couple of years. Not to say that those businesses won't work out or those ideas weren't incredibly smart. I think that is what you're not going to see over the next. You're going to have to prove yourself more. You're going to have to prove that you have the leadership in front of you. You're going to have to possibly give up more than you've wanted. And that was really the whole point of the end of the article is this is all still on the table. That investment is still on the table. It's just like what we see right now, the flip from carrier to shipper. It's just not going to be probably the valuation that people had expected to see after what they saw over the last couple of years.
Grace, if there's one specific maybe sector of supply chain that you think still has the potential to really be on the receiving end of any more VC investment, what do you think that sector is going to be? Is it still going to be that kind of visibility, track, trace? Is it going to be more of like the TMS software? What do you think?
Yikes, TMS is too early for that. No. Yikes. I think that I'm actually a little bit more interested in M&A activity over the next couple of years, and interested in seeing who picks up who, especially with a lot of really interesting companies holding cash right now. But in whole, I think what fascinates me is I do love the fintech space in this industry, especially when we see problems right now with carriers having issues with fuel cards or just being able to keep their business afloat. I think that there's a lot of interesting investment that you can make in fintech to make sure that you do have, right, that cash flow can stay pushed out and that runway as much as possible. I think last mile delivery will still be interesting. It's just about I think we'll see the valuations are just going to be much lower. I think that there's incredible space even in global shipping still with a lot of issues we see. Visibility, I think, it's made its run. That's the one I think is going to be proving itself in its value more the next year. I don't think you're going to see a random visibility player pop up, but I think you're going to see them really start to execute a lot of what they've promised investors over this next year.
Awesome. Grace, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's always great to hear your perspective and get the latest about what's happening, not just in freight, but fintech as well. We'll be sure to catch up with you as this continues to develop.
Thanks, guys. Have a good morning.
Have a great weekend, Grace. Right now we're going to head over to Sydney Edwards. She's got our first look at headlines for this morning.